Okay, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Hey, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Gary. Say hi, Gary. There we go. Okay, so here we are. What's that? Turn off your cell phones. We've been instructed by the audience to turn off your cell phones. You can just put it silent. That's fine. You know, people have families and important things. Just don't, crunch potato chips or popcorn in the middle. That's my friend Lisa. Anyway, yeah. So what can I tell you? So tonight we're our 26th show. Pretty amazing. 26 shows. So year and a couple of months, if you want to do the math. And I have my daughter here for the very last show before she goes back to college, UCLA, yay. By the way, there's a few people here, including my daughter, that are in Love's Labor Lost behind the Mill Valley Library. That's every weekend through Labor Day. Marianne as well. Free? It's free. Shakespeare in the Park.
At 2 p.m.
At 2 p.m. Be there. And also...
Saturdays and Sundays and Labor Day Monday.
2 p.m.
Yeah, 2 p.m. And also, let's see, just so you know, tomorrow night in this very same space, my improv troupe is also performing here. So you guys want to come back? You're welcome to. So let's just talk about what we do here. This is The Fly, right? The Fly Story Slam, and it is a... What's that? Am I not talking loud enough? I feel like I'm talking really loud. Can you guys hear me? By the way, if anybody in the audience at any point feels like there's a storyteller that isn't talking loud enough, just raise your hand and they will know they need to speak up. Okay, everybody up for that? Show me. Good. Okay, good. So this is the Fly Story Slam. It is very similar, if not exactly like the Moth. We have taken we've stolen their idea, and we're doing it here in Mill Valley. And the big thing here is that we are telling authentic, true stories that come from ourselves. This is not made up. These are true stories, and they're based on our memories of them, and we're telling them live in front of you. Now, one thing to keep in mind is every storyteller that comes here, it comes up on stage, is being very brave. This is really hard to come up in front of an audience and have this conversation or tell a story. And some of the stories have been really touching. Some are intimate. Some are funny. Some are ridiculous. And we have all of the above. And each time someone comes up, it can be scary. So please support all the storytellers. And the other thing is, I really want to appreciate the people that I'm seeing here that come again and again, because we are trying to have a community here of storytellers and people coming in and sharing. We live in a pretty divisive world right now, and it's nice to have a community where people can come together and tell nice stories. Okay? We good? Yeah? Oh boy, I just want to feature this real quick. It's hard to see. Let's just turn these off. These wonderful t-shirts are on sale. So I'm wearing one tonight. There we go. It's beautiful. You can own one of these beautiful t-shirts. We'll talk to me later. We've got it in every size. If you want to support The Fly, it's right there. And yeah, Jules has one right over there. She's showing you. That one was a little crooked. But the rest of them, yeah, there we go. Crooked. So when you're making t-shirts, you have to be really careful about, because once it's on, you know, and unfortunately. All right. So I think that's it. Am I missing anything? CJ, did I miss anything? That's my mom. She knows if I've remembered everything. I have my wife here, my daughter's here, my friend Lisa, Scott, all my friends, all the people coming back, really appreciate it. All right. So I'm going to start with the first story. The theme tonight is, what is the theme tonight, everybody? Anybody know? It's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated. And my story is about how it can be really complicated. Sydney was small in stature, but very large in personality. He was a guy who had this wit that was amazing, but sometimes went over into political incorrectness, sometimes just plain old offensiveness, but somehow he did it in a way where he got away with murder. I don't know how he did it, but he got away with it. we would go, as an example, we went to a Chinese food restaurant, and we're at the restaurant, and he says something blatantly racist to the Chinese waitress, and he does it with a glint in his eye and a precocious smile, and somehow it's fine. She's laughing along with him, and I'm blown away. Sydney also was really good at giving people shit, you know, and making fun of people, and that was his thing. And you know what? I thought I kind of got it. I thought I sort of understood his humor. Apparently, I did not. So let's see. It was, so Sydney and my mother-in-law have been partners for many, many years. And it was my mother-in-law's 70th birthday party, and Sydney's as well. And they were having a joint celebration. And Justine and I were asked to come into London and to give a speech at the ceremony. And we really weren't sure what to say. And so we went over to Justine's friend's, Nessie's house, and Nessie's partner, Joe, was there. And Joe and Nessie and Justine and I got really stoned, and we brainstormed. And we got through we were brainstorming, and then suddenly Joe had an idea, and it was hilarious. I mean, we were in tears. This was the funniest thing. This is going to be perfect. So we go up, it's the night of the event, and we go up onto the stage, and Justine gets the mic, and she sits there, and she starts extolling the wonderful qualities of her mother. And I just want to put a step aside here and tell you that her mother is amazing. She's kind and caring and generous beyond all belief, and she's like Glenda the Good Witch. She's like, she's like sparkles and smiles and sunshine, right? This is my mother-in-law. So my wife is sitting there talking about this long, justifiably long list of qualities that my mother-in-law has. These wonderful things. She's going on and on and on about this. And then she hands the mic over to me. And I take the mic, and I pause for a moment, and I say, so she said all these wonderful things, and then I take the mic and I say, and Sydney, you're one lucky bastard. And I took the mic and I dropped it. Now, Obama had just done this, right? The dropping the mic thing was a thing, and I thought maybe that definitely crossed the pond. I mean, it's Obama, it's our president. It had not. So I start walking off stage, and there's a little bit of laughter, but generally there's so uncomfortable silence. And I get there, and later in the evening, one of Sydney's family members comes up to me and wants to fight me. He wants to fight me. And fortunately, no fisticuffs happened, but for years, Sydney was mad at me. I'm not saying like, oh, he's mad at me. For years. For years, every time I would see him, he'd pull me aside and say, what were you thinking? What made you think that was funny? And I just had to eat crow, because this is my mother-in-law's partner. I had to sort of just, suck it up. And after a while, we finally made peace, and we moved on. Now, unfortunately, Sydney died a couple of years ago, but it was my mother-in-law's 80th birthday this past, just a month ago. And we were in London, and of course, it was time for us to make another speech. And I was really careful not to say anything too offensive. I still crossed the line a little bit, but Justine will tell you about that later. But I think it all went fine. But before I got to the speech, I had two guys who had been at the 70th birthday party, who I hadn't seen in 10 years, come running up to me and saying, oh my God, we still talk about your speech. Sydney was one lucky bastard. And I'm like, oh God, thank God somebody got the joke. Sydney was a guy who drew the lines that only he could cross. And it took me a long time to figure out how to navigate his sense of humor. But we worked it out. We had drinks, we had fun, we had a lot of laughter over the course of the years of his life. And at the end of the day, it was great to know that lucky bastard. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So who's next, Isa? Sherry is next, everybody. Let's give a big round of applause for Sherry, everybody. Okay. All right. Sherry, everybody.
For much of my life, I felt about kissing and sex in general, well, my feelings were very complicated about it. So during my youth, all I knew about sex was from watching Mighty Mouse and Popeye cartoons. I learned that there were two kinds of men: the sweet, shy, nice guy who could become a hero when he needed to, and the strong, handsome, manly man who made the girl swoon until he tried to kiss her. Apparently, a kiss was a fate worse than death. The girl would scream and struggle, but after being rescued by the nice guy, she covered him with kisses. He wasn't allowed to kiss back. He could only chuckle and blush. We kids learned our gender roles from these cartoons. I used to play with my next door neighbor, Sammy. He was a skinny little blonde kid with a perpetual snot rash under his nose. But when he looked in the mirror, he saw Superman. He always wore red rubber boots, red shorts, a white t-shirt, pink swim goggles with the lenses poked out, and a towel pinned around his neck for a cape. He liked to climb up high ledges and jump off, pretending to fly. I would do my damsel in distress bit, and he would rush up to fight the invisible monsters. Arr, arr, that's what you think, pow! I didn't cover him with kisses afterwards, however, because I knew that a kiss was a dangerous thing. But one Halloween, Sammy and I went trick-or-treating in the dark, and we kissed through our masks. Now, back in those days, we had those big plastic masks with the tiny eye holes that you could barely see through, and they made our faces all sweaty. Well, I figured that if our lips didn't actually touch, then it was okay. Plus, we couldn't get cooties. The problem was, Sammy was dressed as Secret Agent Man, while I was stuck in my brother's old Porky Pig costumes. It was humiliating. I was 14 before I had my first real kiss with my first love, Bill. He lived on the opposite side of the city, so I only got to see him on those rare occasions when the three churches of God had combined youth group outings. After one such outing, the bus was taking us kids back home, and when it arrived at Bill's stop, I got off with him to say goodbye. All the kids on the bus were yelling, "Kiss her, kiss her." So Bill looked at me and he said, "Can I?" And I went, "No, no," as I backed up the steps of the bus. I went back to my seat and sat down where my friend Susie went, "You idiot!" She was right, and I promised myself I would do better next time. So the next outing was at a state park. I scoped out the perfect spot for our first kiss. It was a little wooden bridge on a creek in the woods. I steeled myself up and I said, "I'm ready." I laid down on the bridge and Bill laid on top of me. He practically had to hold me down. We kissed, and the world did not end. The sky didn't fall. It was nice. Would have been nicer had he closed his eyes, but still nice. Fast forward 3 years. There was this extremely cute guy in my church named Chad. And we'd had a crush on each other for a while, but had barely spoken 5 words. You see, Chad was a year younger than me, and all the other kids hated him because he wasn't saved. They could be vicious, so I was afraid to be known as Chad's girlfriend. But on Christmas, our youth group had a live nativity scene. I was the angel, and Chad was one of the shepherds. He looked so handsome in his costume. People drove up and they watched the show from the warmth of their cars, while we kids were outside freezing to death. In between shows, Chad and I went into the church basement and we started kissing. We were getting warm that way. Unfortunately, a couple of younger girls saw us and they ran out of the room giggling to tell on us to the preacher's wife. She was horrified. She came up and she gave me a stern lecture, and I apologized to her the next Sunday. But afterwards I thought, What did I apologize for? We did nothing wrong. We were friends. We kissed. Big deal. It's not like we were going at it all hot and heavy. So from that moment forward, I made up for lost time. I kissed half the boys in church camp and half of the men in the Society for Creative Anachronisms. I lost count long ago of how many I kissed. My husband David kissed me the first night that we met in the parking lot outside after a ballroom dance. It was nice. Would have been nicer had he not slipped me the tongue, but still nice. Luckily, I had gotten over my fear by then and was well practiced. Innocence is highly overrated, and I'm glad I lost mine long ago.
Sherry, everybody, Sherry. Do you guys remember those costumes, like with the masks? I mean, we all dealt with that, right? I just remember having those in Boston where I grew up, and it was freezing outside. So you also had to wear, like, you had like your Spider-Man or Batman or whatever costume, and then you had to wear your big puffy jacket over it. And then you didn't want to because like it was everybody couldn't see what you were wearing, but it was anyway. Exactly. Yeah, it was, and they weren't very comfortable, and they would pinch your ears, and they smelled. Yes, after a while, absolutely. And then you want to eat your candy, and after like the third house, you have it up top of your head anyway, right? You're not even worried about it. Okay. Who do we have next, Isa? Marianne. Marianne is in Love's Labor's Lost. She has a mustache in that play.
Gave it away.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, I'm a fast grower. I get the mustache overnight. Okay, it's complicated. All right. Good. When I got married, I had barely finished walking down the aisle when I was still shaking out dry rice and out of my hair and out of my wedding gown, when my dad approached me and said, "Cookie, you need to have your first child before you're 30. This wasn't just a suggestion. He was an OBGYN, and he was serious. This was medical advice, unsolicited, and boy, was the pressure on. I decided then that if I ever did have children, that I would make a vow and not pressure them to make decisions on things that I thought they needed to do, that they would have their own lives to make these decisions that they would have to live with. So I did pretty well. I didn't meddle too much. I mean, sometimes I did. But there was this one time when my eldest son got into college. And the way the process works is you get your applications in, and then you get your things back in the spring, and then you have a deadline where you're supposed to say, this is the school I'm committing to. And he waited until the last hour. And he got in his car and he went for a drive, and his dad and I were just freaking out. We're like, where is it gonna go? Is it gonna be the university in California, or is it the university in Texas? Because it's going to make a big difference. And a little while later, he came back in and walked right by us. And on the way to his bedroom, he casually said over his shoulder, "It's Texas." And that was it. He made up his mind. And we thought, well, that seems pretty abrupt and uninformed, you know. But it turned out he put in so much research into this and talked to graduates, and he really made the right choice for himself. We just weren't invited into the process. So I guess I got my wish on that. Then a few years, another story, I have a son with, my middle son, he was at middle school here in Mill Valley, and he got into a special arts high school called Marin School of the Arts. And he had decided that morning, "Mom, I'm not gonna go. I'm so committed to my friends. I'm gonna go to the local high school, TAM, which is around the corner here." And I said, "All right, buddy, I think you're making a mistake, but if that's what you want to do, that's what you're gonna do." And that afternoon, as moms in Mill Valley do, I was driving my kids around. I'm the silent chauffeur in the front seat, and then my kid Hooper is in the back with his best friend. And his best friend says to him, all enthusiastically, he goes, "Guess what? I got a scholarship to a private high school, so I'm not gonna go to TAM." And Cooper suddenly goes, "Well, yeah, I'm going to MSA. I'm going to Marin School of the Arts." And I almost swerved off the road. I'm like, okay, and I'm hearing all this. So he made a decision, and it stuck, and it was great for him. Well, these days my kids are launched. They're no longer in my house or in the backseat of my car. And I realized there was a time in their lives that I knew almost everything about them. But now that they're grown and gone, I get little moments of information, like maybe a text message or something from their partner or social media. But for the most part, I have to sort of be sleuthing information out of them. Well, my eldest son finally got married to his sweetheart. They live in Texas, and that was about 2 years ago. And I know that they want to have children someday, and I know I want to be a grandma, but I am not going to ask the question as much as I want to. You know, I want to know what's happening in that department. Am I going to be a grandma? So, well, it's really none of my business, but it is a complicated situation. And so I figured, you know, if I was the mother of the bride, maybe I'd feel more connected, so I could just sort of go and say, hey, what you working on? But I don't, you know. I just hold back and I kind of just get quiet. So anytime I get a text from my son, like call me, or I have to ask you a question, I get all excited. I'm like, oh, he's going to ask me, do I want to be called grandma or Nona or Farmore? It's all in my imagination because I haven't heard anything. I don't know, you know. And so I decided that I'm going to become the very special, sneaky grandma, and I'm going to start looking at their social media. So now I find myself, every time they're on vacation or some trip, I'm like, what's she holding in her hand? Is that a sparkling water, or is that maybe a white wine spritzer? Is that a beer, or is it a non-alcoholic beer? And I'm like, girl, you have to stop this. This is ridiculous. But I figured out that the best thing would be, the solution would be if I got in a car ride with them. You know, like a long, Texas is a big state, like a long car ride to go somewhere. And they'll just suddenly get comfortable and start talking and forget that I'm there, and maybe I'll start hearing things. So I've already booked my tickets for Thanksgiving, and we'll see what happens.
Marianne, everybody, Marianne. What's that? Oh, that's Marianne. What's that?
Oh, that's my son's wedding.
That's your son's wedding. Okay, there you go. Nice. So many things came up to my mind when you're telling that story. First of all, I have had that same experience driving the kids around, and my daughter here, Isa, with her friends, telling all these stories, and I hear everything, you know, and they're going on and on. It kind of reminded me, back in the day, I did a lot of anti-tobacco research. And when we were doing this research, we actually, we had 48 hours to do a special piece on the research we were doing. And so they were in there, we were in a small focus group room, and we had a cameraman there with a big, this is back in the day, so it was a big camera, like, you know, with a light on it. And these teenagers were telling us how they were smoking, and they said, all of a sudden they said, do you think our parents are going to find out about this? And I'm like, dude, the camera is, they just don't, they don't process, it's not the same. Anyway. Okay, Isa, who do we have next? Dave, we have Dave. Come on up, Dave. Dave is our local race car driver, surfer, and short swear, obviously. Here we go. And you're wearing the shirt.
Short's not allowed.
And you're wearing the shirt.
I am wearing the shirt. Yeah, no, the shirt is integral to the story. Hi, everybody. All right. So what's really integral to the story here is actually my friend John, right? And so I need to figure out a way to introduce you to John. And the first thing I thought of was the shirt that he gave me ages ago, which I'll read it because I know the lighting's terrible. But it says, "Protons have mass?" I didn't know they were Catholic. Just like... So that's John. He is very simple. He's very silly. He was telling dad jokes before either of us were dads, right? And he's very Christian, right? He came from Midwest somewhere. He's just like a simple, kind, nice person. That's it. And this was him kind of giving me a little jab about my Catholic upbringing with, you know, protons have mass. Okay, buddy. So we met as instructors at the Jim Russell Racing Driver School in Sonoma, so that is relevant. You're right, Carrie. Which is a job that's predominantly pretty repetitive and boring until all of a sudden there's moments of complete madness. And we bonded well because we were both cool under pressure and talked on the radio very calmly and figured out what we needed to do. And we just became really good friends. And he had his other dream. We both obviously were really into race driving and motorsports and that sort of thing, but he also had a real, music was actually kind of his first calling. And he had this dream of becoming a conductor, which, I don't know what that takes. There aren't very many of them. So, but that was kind of like what he wanted to do next. And time goes by, and he got accepted to a music program at the University of Michigan, which I think is, a thing here. And so, off he went. And one of his big phrases was like, see ya, right when you get work. It's just like, okay, yeah, I'll write when I get work. You have a good time. So time went by, and I actually, I got some work. And I started working in NASCAR, which I had not expected, and I was just doing some consulting stuff. But I was going to all the NASCAR races. And NASCAR is pretty big in Michigan because that's Ford and Chevrolet, and the NASCAR races in Michigan happen right in the summertime. It's a really big track. It's got a big infield. People do the party buses and the whole thing. NASCAR in Michigan's a big thing in the summertime. So I reached out to him, and I'm like, hey, it's been, I don't know, probably 2 years or so. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm actually coming to Michigan. Do you want to go inside the NASCAR Cup garage? Because I can do all the things and show you all the things if you want. He's like, yeah, man, great. Yeah, let's do it. So he agreed. So he picks me up. I fly in there, and he picks me up on Thursday night and brings me to his house, which is great. It's one less night in a hotel. This is good. We hang out. Get up in the morning on Friday, and we drive into the track. So he's driving me in his car. The rest of the crew is in rental cars and hotels and everything. And we're just driving in. This is kind of complicated already, isn't it, really? So we're driving into the racetrack. That's it. I didn't think much of it, except that I'm used to kind of going in the side where all the team people drive in, and you got your little credential thing on a lanyard. You're like, hey, and the security's like, hey, go, everyone go. We don't care. You got the thing, go. But we were coming from his house, so we were coming from the other side, and we're actually in line with the fans and the party buses, and they kind of got to look through all the stuff that everyone's bringing. I don't know. I'm not usually on this side of things. So we're waiting in line, and we get to the front of the line, and there's these two Michigan State troopers, and they, we pull up to them, and they give us the step out of the car. It's like, okay, all right. They say step out of the car, I'm gonna step out of the car. They weren't asking other people to step out of the car. I did, but yeah, just step out of the car. And so, state trooper on each side, starts looking around the car, and the trooper on my side stands up, looks me in the eye, and says, "Were you planning to tell me about this firearm that's in this vehicle?" I'm like, I am white. I'm like, no, because I did not know there was a firearm in the vehicle. And and same thing, trooper on the other side talks to John, and I'm just like, it's not my car. I don't know. I'm just, here's my lanyard thing. I'm going into work. That doesn't matter, right? So this situation is becoming very serious very quickly. So state trooper on John's side is like, so this is your car? Yes, officer. And were you planning to tell us that there's a firearm under the seat of your car here? I didn't know there was a firearm under the seat of my car here. And so now, all of a sudden, we're in a four-way, John and I are in a prisoner's dilemma all of a sudden. And sadly, trust evaporates very quickly, because I'm sitting here being like, dude, I don't know. I knew John really well 2 years ago. There's no way I would have expected him to have, he just never would have owned a handgun. But, it's been 2 years. I don't know. He moved to Michigan. Does everyone in Michigan drive around with handguns? I don't know. And John's over there looking at me being like, I don't know. I knew Dave 2 years ago really well, but now he works in NASCAR. Everyone goes to NASCAR. Do they all travel with handguns? I don't know. And none of this matters to the cops, right? Because the cops are just, they're pissed. This is becoming level 10 drill sergeant, big dude with the badge, and they have guns. This is a very serious situation. I'm sitting here I'm trying to go to work, but now I'm like, shit. I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, I might wind up in handcuffs. I don't know how this turns out. And it's escalating because, I mean, maybe like when how cops behave when they know they're being lied to, and it's just not a good situation. And we're all sitting here, and it's like, it is obvious that somebody here is lying. Like, shit, man. Like, I don't know. And so the cop on my side is coming at me with like, all right, so you're telling me that you were riding in this vehicle and you had no idea that there was a handgun right underneath your feet. Yes, that's what I'm saying. The cop over on the other side is talking to John and being like, so you're telling me that this is your car, this is your vehicle, you drove it from your house, and you had no idea there was a handgun under the seat. John's like, yeah, that's it. So then the cop in front of me is like, so I'm supposed to believe that there was some fairy godmother here that came down, put a handgun under the seat. And I'm still like, I mean, I'm broken. I am broken into pieces. I don't know what to say. Like, and then I see the cop on the other side of the car, and I see like the brim of his hat go down a little bit, and I see his head start to shake, and I see a little bit of a smile here, and he starts like, and he looks over the other cop, he's like, fairy godmother? And my cop is like, I thought that was so good. Oh, we're just messing with you guys. You guys can go. And I'm like, it's really, really not okay. So John and I climb back into the car. And we're like, great, and we go into the NASCAR garage, and I show him the things, and we have a fine time, and did all the things we were going to do. And this is probably going to happen anyways, honestly. But on the honest result is I'd never talk to John again, ever. And I kind of look back on it now, and I'm kind of like, I think it is. Like, everybody has their own sense of humor. It took me a while to get John's sense of humor. And the sense of humor of the Michigan State Troopers is one where they definitely get to draw the lines that only they can cross. And for them, they're probably just trying not to be bored, running through 10,000 vehicles coming through every day. And so I just have to conclude, like, yeah, I mean, that's the way the world works. Sense of humor is very, very, very widely. So that's it.
Dave, everybody, it's Dave. So just so you know, Dave, yes, in Michigan, I went to University of Michigan, we all did carry guns. That was a thing. Yeah. Yeah. I've got one right here. No. Yeah. No guns. I just, I actually, after Marianne's story, someone actually did the thing in the beginning what was complicated, and I won't say who it is, but it says, I called my daughter's, this is like what's complicated, I called my daughter's fiance the wrong name. I called him by her ex-husband's name. Ouch. All right, we have one more storyteller before our break, and that's going to be Garth, everybody. We have Garth. Come on up. Right there.
Thank you.
Feel free to mess with the mic.
Hey, isn't it amazing how many stories there are in the world? There's a handful of us coming up here to tell stories, but every one of us could stand up and tell the crazy stuff we've gotten involved in. So, talk about complicated. It's pretty common to have people ask married couples, so how did you meet? I was working at the Canal Community Alliance, which is an agency that serves the immigrant community in Marin County in the Canal District of San Rafael. Wonderful organization. And I had quite a few duties there, but one of them was to help mount this needs to go up a little bit. One of them was to help mount the annual Canal Community Alliance Festival, which was a wonderful street fair, which was a very colorful celebration of the various cultures that were represented among the immigrant population there. And we had started some weeks before a raffle and we decided the first prize for the raffle would be a trip to Hawaii for two, a free trip to Hawaii for two. So I made my way across the street to this little hole-in-the-wall travel agency to make arrangements for the tickets, which would be the prize. And when I walked in the door, I saw a beautiful Mexican woman about my age with big brown eyes twinkling, and she looked up at me, and by the end of the conversation, she had invited me to lunch. So later that week, I showed up, and we went out. She took me to a park. She'd prepared a beautiful picnic herself. She'd cooked the whole thing, put it together, and with champagne and goblets. And I realized that this was not just lunch, this was something more. And so it was at this time that I told her that I was probably not a very good candidate for a boyfriend because I was gay. Well, she didn't seem too taken aback. And I really liked who she was. We had wonderful conversation, and she was just delightful. And so I said, you know, we can be friends. And she said, okay. So we did, and we saw each other on a fairly regular basis, and before long we were really good friends. And about a month later, she said to me, let's get married. What? What? And she said, I know, you're gay and all of that, but it would be really good for us to get married because then I could get my citizenship. To say I was surprised would be an understatement. To say I was hesitant would be putting it mildly. So I had all kinds of scenarios in my mind. One is being hauled off to jail. And so despite that, after a few conversations that she arranged with a Latino lawyer, an immigrant lawyer, with a Mexican minister, with various friends, I was prevailed upon, and I decided to do the generous thing, the good thing. And to tell you the truth, I had come to have a lot of respect for the immigrant population and a lot of understanding for the challenges that they had. And I had a lot of compassion and even began to identify with them and their challenges. So I felt like this would be a good thing to do to help her and her kids to get their papers. So I agreed. I've always had a hard time not saying no, or a hard time saying no, rather, which has gotten me into a lot of trouble in various ways I don't have time to tell you about. So the day came, and I got dressed up appropriately and made my way over to Alicia's house. I was fully expecting we were going to go to the courthouse and be pronounced man and wife by the official. But she was dressed beautifully in a wedding gown, and she said, no, we're going to have a real ceremony at the edge of the bay, and there'll be family members there and friends. And I said, but there was no time for questions or for complaints. And so the ceremony went forward, and after it was over, her mother came up and said, Bienvenido a la familia. Welcome to the family. And various other family members came and pumped my hand and said warmly to me, welcome to the family. And various friends were there. So, oh my goodness. I had said to her beforehand, I said, they're going to think we're really married. And she said, yeah, they have to think we're really married because that way the government will think we're really married, so there won't be any trouble. Whew, I'd gotten myself into some pretty deep water. So to be perfectly honest, I'd had so much frustration, so much problem, so much sadness really with my whole life of being gay up at that point. It had been very difficult, even coming to terms with my sexuality, very, very late, very complicated. So there was a part of me that wondered, could I come to really care for a woman? Could I come to be in a relationship with a woman? That was part of what was going in my mind, but it was not to be. About a month after we got married, we were out dancing at Latino night at a local dance place in Larkspur Landing. What was the name of that place that was, did anybody remember? Berman's, is that right? That word came into my mind. Anyway, we were dancing when up walked this really beautiful young man and flashed this big smile at Alicia and then at me. And Alicia had told me that he was the youngest of 3 brothers of this family that she had great respect and love for. They were so talented, such great conversationalists, cultured, artistic, and that Shiken did this and this and this and this and this. Shiken was his name. And I said, where does the name Shiken come from? Because you're Mexican, right? And he said, oh, my grandfathers. Both my grandfathers came to Mexico in the early 1900s, and they both married Mexican women. So our whole family, my mom and my dad and all the family, all the cousins, everybody is half Mexican and half Chinese. And we're culturally Mexican, but we all have Chinese names. It's our tradition. I was intrigued, and I realized I was also smitten. And I could tell that Shiken was smitten as well. Well, we started seeing each other and things moved rather quickly. And before long, I remember, one wonderful night walking for hours under the moon and sitting under the moonlight, talking for a long time, late into the night. Pretty soon it was clear that we were a couple. And so about a month after that, Shiken invited me to go to a party at his sister's house with all the family. But remember, this was the family that Alicia had such great regard for, and some of the family members had been at our wedding. So I was nervous, to put it lightly. And we showed up, and as it dawned on them what the nature of our relationship was, you can imagine that it was difficult for them to get their head around how this man that they thought was the new husband of their friend Alicia was now somehow inexplicably the boyfriend of their youngest brother Shiken. We tried to explain, but they were not pleased. To make a long story short, it took a few years, but everything came out in the wash and everything was fine. And Shiken and I got married, and we've been married for 27 years. And everything turned out well. Alicia got her papers. She's gone back and forth to Mexico for years, lived in San Diego for a long time. Her son got his papers as well. He had from the very beginning called me Dad. I just went to his 40th birthday party. He still calls me Dad. Tells me how important I've been in his life. So there is an order to things, though sometimes it's complicated.
That's very sweet. Yes? How much are the t-shirts? The t-shirts are $25. So, what's that? It was a beautiful story. Let's give it up for Garth, everybody. Absolutely beautiful story. So, like I said, you've heard some funny stories, you've heard some serious stories, and you heard some very brave stories. So it's so wonderful to have everybody do this. We're going to have a break right now, and there's bathrooms in the corner. There's t-shirts. You can talk to me. There is drinks over there. We'll open the door, get some air in here. And remember, come on back for the second half because we got some great stories for you. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Okay, everybody. So a couple of things. I'm going to leave the door open just for a little bit just to get some air in here. So if you get cold, we'll deal with it. While we're going to have someone come up and tell their first story. Before we do that, I'm just going to read a couple of other ones that people who wrote What's Complicated. This one was, I needed a place to live, so I moved in with my best friend's girlfriend. Awkward. Traveling by train into East Berlin without a visa. Probably not a great idea. Which reminds me of a story. My wife and I went to Vietnam, and we got there, and we did not have visas, and we were flying from San Francisco, And they said, don't you need a visa? We said, I don't think so. And they said, okay, you can go to LA. So we went to LA and they said, don't you need a visa? And we're like, we don't think so. Just get us to Korea. And they said, okay. We got to Korea and we were flying with Miles and we got to the nice lounge and the people say, I think you need a visa. And we said, we don't think so. And they said, okay. And we got to Vietnam and they said, you need a visa. And we said, okay. And the guy took our visa, our passports, and came back with a big smile and his hand out, and we gave him some money, and that was it. We got it. Okay, so we're gonna have our next story come up. Let's give it a big hand for Lynn, everybody. Lynn. Right into the mic. I know. There we go. We're gonna put that. You put that on you.
How do you?
Here, can I do it for you?
Yes.
Right there. Lynn, everybody.
I recently decided that it's time for me to start dating again.
Right up the mic.
The mic's okay?
Right up to the mic.
Okay. But based on my past experiences, I'm really not looking forward to it. I mean, for instance, I don't have a problem with younger men, but there is a limit. And I was in Kansas for a high school reunion, and I was sitting in a bar with a couple of my old high school girlfriends. We were enjoying cocktails and catching up when the waitress brought over another round of drinks. And we told her, we didn't order this. And she said, that guy at the end of the bar sent them over. So we looked, and he waved and smiled, and we smiled and mouthed thank you, and so far so good. But then the guy got up and walked over to our table and sat down next to me. And he said, what's your sign? And I decided I'd play along, and I said, Scorpio, what's yours? And he said, Capricorn. And I said, well, what day in January? And he said, January 9th. Really? And he nodded his head yes. And then I asked, what hospital were you born in? And he said, Providence. And I stared at him for a while. And then I asked, what year were you born? And he told me. And I stared a little longer. And I said, my God, I was in the maternity ward with your mother. So that was the end of that. But then there was a Saturday night when my best friend and her fiance and another couple were going to go out dancing. And I wanted to go along, but I didn't have a date. So I asked the men if they could find somebody for me. And they found this attorney. And he was nice looking, seemed intelligent. It was promising. So the six of us were sitting around a table having a drink. And my date looks at me and he says, you're really cute. And I smiled and said, well, I'm glad you think so. But then he shook his head and said, no, cute isn't the right word. You're pretty. Pretty. I think you're really pretty. And I said, well, that's a very nice thing to say. Thank you very much. But then he thought some more. And he said, no, pretty isn't the right word either. He says, you're beautiful. I really think you're beautiful. I mean, that is if you weren't so short. Well, how am I supposed to respond to this? I told him, I have to go to the restroom. And I motioned my best friend to come with me. And when I told her what this man had said, we laughed till our cheeks were sore and our stomach hurt. But then I had to spend the rest of the evening with this idiot. You know, I wasn't just looking for single men. I wanted to find some single women too, to hang with, to do things with. And once I went to this singles event in a beautiful home in Marin. On the patio, there were lots of snacks and free wine and a large group of people. It seemed very promising. I went inside and I found the hostess and I introduced myself and I told her she had a lovely home and I thanked her for hosting the party. And instead of saying, you're welcome, she says, did you see that woman in the shorts when you came in? And I told her I did. I mean, actually, you couldn't miss her. She was very attractive, and she was wearing short shorts and high heels, and she had long red hair flowing down her back. And there was a whole group of men, drinks in hand, standing around her, hanging on to her every word. Well, the hostess says to me, I didn't want to be rude or anything, but I asked her just how old she was. And I said, and what did she say? She said she was 40, and I informed her that this party was only for people who were 50 years old and older. And then the hostess looks me up and down with an interest in evaluating the competition and says, and just how old are you? So anyway, recently, I decided that I was going to dip my toe into the dating pool. And I joined an online dating site. Now, I know people lie on these sites. I mean, the women say they're younger than they are, and they lie about their weight, and the men lie about how tall they are. But when a man says he's interested in anything athletic, preferably outside, you would tend to think he's telling the truth, wouldn't you? No. But anyway, I made a date with this man to go on a hike at the Tennessee Valley Trail. Now that trail is around 3.5 miles round trip, and it's mostly flat, and it's rated as easy. And I noticed right away that my date wasn't wearing proper walking shoes. And he also wasn't wearing a hat. I offered to spray sunscreen on his head, but he said he didn't need it. So we started walking. And after we had walked a little more than a mile, he stumbled and tripped and grabbed for me and knocked me down. And then he just kept going, tumbling till he ended up face down at the bottom of the hill. When he stood up, he seemed kind of stunned. And he had a cut on his head, and his arm was all cut up and badly bruised. And because he was on blood thinners, he was bleeding profusely. Luckily, some people on horseback came by, and they gave him a bandana to wrap his arm up, and they told him that if he hung on to the tail of one of the horses, the horse would pull him up the hill. And it worked. And once he was on level ground, I wanted to take him to the emergency room, but he refused to go. So I took him home, and I gave him some soap and a towel, and he cleaned up, and I poured disinfectant on him. Now this is my first day in many, many years. And it ends up with a horse's tail and lots of blood and disinfected and this injured man with a sunburn on his head standing in front of me. After all these experiences, I've come to some conclusions. If you're a single woman, never ask a man his astrological sign, because you might find out you were in the maternity ward with his mother. And I would recommend avoiding blind dates. And if you're looking to meet single women, a singles event is not the place to do it. And lastly, if a man says that he's interested in something athletic, preferably outdoors, what he's probably talking about is watching the Olympics on TV. Thank you.
Well done. Very good. That's Lynn, everybody. Lynn. The dating game. So much fun. Okay, who's our next storyteller? Isa? Alec. That's Alec. Alec, everybody. Big man. You got? Okay. There you go. Oh yeah, you want that too? Yeah.
I was stuck, stranded on the side of a highway in Canada. And I had a duffel bag, I had my guitar, and I had my thumb stuck out. Oh, and I had one other item. I had a lobster trap. But it was battered and broken, and it was pretty clear that I had to leave it behind. And that left me a little bit distraught. I couldn't figure out why. I mean, it's just a lobster trap. There must be a backstory. Growing up, I was at times an imperfect son with a more than healthy dose of teenage angst and rebellion. And most of this was directed at my dad, who was a beloved and larger-than-life figure. And make no mistake, we had plenty of fun and meaningful moments, but I was not always easy. And I'd like to think that when I went off to college, some of those rough edges smoothed over a bit. And I started to quietly look for ways to show appreciation and admiration. I was mostly unsuccessful. I went to college in a little town, Brunswick, on the coast of Maine, a beautiful, beautiful corner of the world. My parents came to visit once, and my dad fell in love with the Maine coastline, the little towns, the harbors, the fishing boats, but he mostly loved the ocean debris. Driftwood and shells and buoys. He did some amazing artwork out of driftwood. And he loved lobster rolls. I mean, what's not to like? It's melted butter and mayonnaise. I mean, yum, fantastic. So I got it in my head to find a discarded, weathered, wooden lobster trap and get it home to him in St. Louis, Missouri, our hometown. It was just the kind of thing that he would love. Could I do it? I was determined. And that's why, after my junior year, I found myself driving home through Canada in my little blue Volkswagen Bug with my best friend, Ben, in the passenger seat, and a lobster trap tied to the back of the Volkswagen. My goal was to get home in time for my dad's 50th birthday. And this is one of those ancient Volkswagens with the engine in the back. I mean, completely unsafe, but we were living large. We had survived finals. It was summer break. My little cassette deck was cranking out the tunes, the Eagles, Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Doobie Brothers. Anybody remember, whoa, rockin' down the highway? Anyway, yeah. that was our song, and life was good. And then, boom, in an instant, it wasn't good. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there were flames shooting up from the engine. The engine was on fire, and the lobster trap was on fire. We pulled over, we jumped out of the car. I still remember the fear and the smell. But I mostly remember the sight of an ambulance driver. He'd been going the other way on the highway, sprinting across the highway with the fire extinguisher in his hand, yelling, "Get away from the car!" He didn't need to tell me twice. We backed off, and he put the fire out. My hero. But my little Volkswagen was dead. That Beetle was squashed, and the lobster trap was toast. What to do now? We stuck out our thumbs. And we caught a ride to Detroit. I took the bus home to St. Louis. I made it home in time for my dad's 50th birthday, but I was empty-handed. If he was disappointed, he didn't show it. He was just happy to see me. But I couldn't let go of this lobster trap idea. I don't know. Freud might have something to say about this. Fast forward, a year later, I'm doing the exact same drive, Maine to Missouri. Only this time, I'm in my used brown Pinto. So, there we go. Those of you over 50 or maybe over 60 know that Pintos were notorious for spontaneously blowing up if they were rear-ended. Don't worry, that didn't happen. But I did have a lobster trap in the back, and I made it home for his 51st birthday. He couldn't believe it. He loved it. Best ocean debris ever. And that lobster trap occupied a prime spot on my parents' back porch. My dad ended up writing a children's book, Island Eyes, The Adventures of a Shell. And a lobster trap was a key character in that book, and that still makes me smile. My dad passed away at a young age. My mom moved away. I have no idea what happened to that lobster trap. But years later, I had an epiphany, and something dawned on me that most of you in the audience have probably already realized. It was more than a lobster trap. It was an offering. It was my way of saying, I see you, and I appreciate you, and I love you. It wasn't that complicated. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh.
Howdy, everybody. And by the way, it's not lobster, it's lobster. Anyway, it's wicked. Okay, our next storyteller is Colleen. Coming up, Colleen, everybody.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Okay, my story is about how it came to be that I learned how to decorate a Christmas tree from my Jewish mother-in-law, Arlene. I had been dating a young man only a couple months, and he invited me home to his parents' apartment for Christmas dinner. And being the plain rap Protestant that I am, I said, but you're Jewish. And he said, my mother loves Christmas. I grew up with the Christmas tree, with stockings, with cookies for Santa, the whole schmear. You will see. And I saw the most beautifully curated Christmas tree that matched their decor in colors soft dusty rose, sage green, touches of silver. There was a turban on top of ribbons that cascaded down just perfectly. I had never seen anything like it, except, of course, in a department store lobby, which is why we called that tree the Neiman Marcus tree. So we get married. He's sitting right there. And I enter an unfamiliar culture and a whole bunch of new family stories. So I learned from my father-in-law that his grandmother had started a chain of pharmacies. And good business is decorating for Christmas and stocking Christmas gifts. And so that tradition migrated to their home, and he grew up with a Christmas tree. And I learned from my mother-in-law, Arlene, that her mother, her Yiddish-speaking mother, thought that Christmas trees were the most beautiful thing that she had ever seen. So she took a chance living in Boyle Heights, a predominantly Jewish neighborhood in Los Angeles. She put a big Christmas tree in her picture window. Risky business because the rabbi lived a couple doors down. So Arlene grew up with a Christmas tree. So she also was born and raised in Los Angeles, and she had acquired a very unique accent. And so her voice messages to me would sound something like this. Call, it's Arlene, honey. Calling to check in. Call me later. Bye-bye. And as I got to know my mother-in-law, it was clear to me that the most important thing to her was to have us all together as a family. So she wanted to celebrate everything. And birthdays and Mother's Day and Father's Day were sacred, of course, but we hunted for Easter eggs, we lit menorahs, we set aside a seat for Elijah. We just celebrated. Well, one year I get a call from Arlene. Call. It's Arlene, honey. Easter and Passover are on the same day this year. What should we do? Well, I'd been in the family maybe 10 or 12 years at this point, and I said, well, let's celebrate them both. She paused and she said, I can't do that. I just can't. She was faced to choose. The Jewish calendar had not been kind to her, and she ended up choosing Passover. But for many years, the Jewish calendar had played ball with her need to celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah. They were typically a couple weeks apart, and so she could have time to reset her decor. So she had a wet bar that you could see between the living room and the dining room, and she would put her Hanukkah tchotchkes on this wet bar, crystal dreidels, Christopher Radko Hanukkah ornaments, and she would sprinkle those in between the menorahs. And then Christmas would come and she'd switch it out. We would call that bar, her wet bar, the Hanukkah bar. Well, we entered a time of compression, and Hanukkah and Christmas were only a week apart, sometimes only a few days apart. So what did she do? She left them all up. We walked into her apartment, Hanukkah bar here, Christmas tree here. My mother-in-law, I only had her for 19 years. We talked probably every day for the last 10 of those. She was another mother to me. I was able to say goodbye to her when she was dying. I whispered in her ear, you were the most wonderful surprise. It always tickled me that she gave me her tips and tricks on Christmas trees, and I will share them with you. You periodically step back when you're putting on your lights to make sure there are no voids. You add your ribbon, your organic material, what have you, to your tree before you place your ornaments. But the most important thing I learned from her was to find every reason to gather together with the people you love. Celebrate what you want, how you want to, because it's just not that complicated. And I have pictures.
Yeah, oh, this picture? There we go. Tell us about the pictures.
So that's our main on the left there, and then you can't really see, but
Here,
the Hanukkah bar is through the Hanukkah bar is through the This is what she put up when she got really sick and she couldn't really handle a tree. She did these branches with the Christmas ornaments, but the Hanukkah bar is in the back, and then those were her three little grandbaby elves and her sage and soft green decor. Right at Christmas time.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Colleen, everybody, that's a great story, Colleen. Okay, we have, what was next? We have one last story, right? Just one, is that right, Isa? We have one last story, a story we've all been looking forward to. This is Rich. Let's get Rich up here for his story, everybody. All right, Rich, take it away.
Okay. So I was completely frozen, trying not to move a muscle, trying not to even breathe. And this is the story how an ordinary morning at home got very complicated very quickly. In 1993, I was 28 years old and I was living in a group house in San Francisco. And the house disbanded and I had to find a new home. So I hunted around and I found this lovely flat with these three wonderful women, and they wanted me to live there and I wanted to live with them. But there was one catch. The woman who was moving out, her name was Susan. Susan was moving out on April 1st and I needed a place on March 1st. So these generous ladies said, we have a storeroom that's big enough for a futon. If you are willing to live in that storeroom for a month, you can stay here for free and take Susan's room when she moves out. So I said, sure, that sounds good to me. One note about Susan, who was going to move out. She was completely blind and she'd been dealing with debilitating arthritis for her whole life, which she had alchemized wonderfully. She was a hospital chaplain. She was a little older than us. She was in her 50s. We were in our late 20s. So the very first morning I spent there, I woke up in the storeroom and I was relaxing on the futon and the phone rang. And I have to say, especially for the young folks, the phone in 1993 was a plastic box attached to the wall, and you spoke into a handle that was attached by a cord that looked like a long curly fry into the box. Typically, a household only had one of these phones, and people shared the phone. So the phone rang, and I thought no one was home. I got up, and I started down the hallway. There was a long hallway that ran the length of this flat, and the phone was right about in the middle of the hallway. And I was pretty close. I was 8 feet from the phone when the bathroom door flung open and out burst Susan. And Susan was not wearing any clothes. She was not wearing a towel. She was completely naked and dripping wet from the shower. And that was the moment I was done for. My window had passed. The window to say, Susan, it's me, it's Rich, the new guy. I'm in the hallway. But I didn't say that because I froze. I froze because I did not expect a naked blind woman to come running around and charge me like a baby rhino dripping with shower water. So I froze, and Susan got to the phone. Hello? No, she's not here right now. Yeah, I'll let her know you called. And the minute she put down the phone, an anguished stalemate began.
If you had been there, you would have seen this tableau of escalating tension. Susan stood there like this, with her mouth agape and her eyes squinting and blinking furtively in her private darkness. And she knew something was wrong. I could even see her nostrils pursing as she sniffed to try to figure out what was this threat in the hallway as she stood naked. And there was me, a bit like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, with my hands limply frozen and my mouth in a big O so that I might breathe without being heard. And I thought about backtracking, just trying to backtrack back to the storeroom, but the floor was hardwood and I knew it would have creaked and that would have made it even worse. And I thought for a moment that I'd never been in a situation like this that was getting exponentially worse every second. The grave was just getting deeper and deeper with each moment of silence. But again, the window of speaking without looking like a creep had already passed, so I was just frozen. Well, eventually, Susan began to speak. And of course, there I was thinking, 30 seconds ago, I was just a nice guy living in a storeroom, and now I am the silent stalker of a naked, blind woman. I do not want this. I didn't want this situation. So Susan speaks, and she's trying to remain calm, but her voice is quavering noticeably with fear. Is there someone there? And I knew I had a choice here. I could have just waited her out. I thought about it. She's blind, she can't see me, and she's kind of disabled, so she's not going to lunge over and grab me. So I could have just stayed. Maybe she would have attributed it to some sort of paranormal event and thought later that that was the ghost in the hallway she met that one time. But that seemed unacceptable, so I said, Susan, it's me, Rich, the new guy. I'm sorry I surprised you. And understandably, that was not completely satisfying to her. And with the follow-up question, she lifted her hands to try to cover the sensitive parts. And she said, what are you doing? And again, I realized I had a choice. I could have said, well, I'm here staring at your naked body, which I was not, but I thought that's probably what she's afraid I'm doing. All I could think about was how to extract myself from that situation. The other thing I could have said was, I'm just here trying not to have a fucking heart attack because I haven't breathed in 3 minutes. But I didn't say that either. Instead, I gave the feeblest response in the history of feeble responses. I thought about my situation and I said, oh, I was just here in the hall adjusting that picture on the wall. And to make it true, I moved over to the wall and leveled up the faded nautical print that was there, just so it would be true. And she said, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm going back to my room now. And she sort of padded wetly back to her room. And I, covered in sweat, covered in shame, slunk back to my storeroom. But I'm happy to report that within an hour, Susan, now fully clothed, and I sat at the kitchen table and laughed our asses off about what had just happened. We enjoyed our month together and remained friends after she moved out. But for those moments in the hallway, it was truly traumatic. I learned the hard way that sometimes you find yourself ensnared in an impossible moment. Sometimes the saying, "He who hesitates is lost," turns to be brutally true, because things can get complicated very quickly, and you can go from being a nice guy in the storeroom to a creeping psychopath in the blink of an eye.
Well done.
Thank you.
Rich, everybody, Rich! I love his stories. So we've come to the end. We have now had this is our 26th show we've just completed. I want to give a big hand for all the storytellers that were here tonight. Big hand. And a couple things, a couple announcements. Number one, don't forget, if anybody's interested, we do have an improv show here tomorrow night. Starts at 8 o'clock. Doors open at 7:30. We have our next show is September 25th. The theme is Wit's End. So if you want to tell a story, please reach out to me and we can talk about it. And then what else? Oh, t-shirts. If you want t-shirts, they're here. Made it myself. And make sure all the storytellers, we're going to come up and take a picture. But thank you, everybody. I'm Gary. Have a great night.